Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. What's going on, gentlemen? What are we talking about today on this new episode of Cents Per Mile?
We're talking about taking a risk and doing it with your brand because maybe it currently sucks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that want to play it safe, but it's like, you know, at that point, it's almost better sometimes to have a bad brand than it is to have like a really, really vanilla one, because at least people are talking about you. But that being said, just get all the stuff out of the way. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, everywhere you get your podcasts. So if you could, you know, go there, maybe give us a rate, subscribe, like, that kind of thing. Just pushes us further out and gives us a better reach.
Yeah, and you can also go to centspermilepodcast.com, suggest a topic, put yourself in to be a guest, or become a sponsor.
You want to try that one again?
Or you can go to centspermilepodcast.com and submit to be a guest, be a sponsor, or submit a topic.
Yep, and then that way we can hear more from you and we can actually give you the content that you want. Do we have a sponsor today, Charles?
We do. We got TAFS. It's more than factoring. You get paid fast, 365 days a year. It's good, folks. You should call them at 866-703-2176.
All right, well, I think it's time for the news. All right, so it's time for the news. Basically, we go through CDLLife. We look at the past couple weeks, and we just pull some of the best stories to talk about. So it turns out that there is a trucking company which has recently started to provide paid personal training for its employees. And one of their biggest pushes is, you know, the average driver lives 16 years less than most other Americans because of the nature of their job. But the interesting thing is when a local news channel decided to do the story, it turns out the only people who actually made it in to see the personal trainer on a regular basis are office employees.
So it's like Driver Appreciation Day.
Every week is Driver Appreciation Week. We have a personal trainer, but you can't make it. You know, at least they're not, you know, just offering cheeseburgers every day for the office employees.
I think you'd have a better push out of like giving them a gym membership that could be, you know, widely received nationwide. That seems like it would be. This seems more like someone put it on paper just to say we did something.
It is true. And I mean the owner had great intentions. It's just I don't think he thought about the nature of half the people that work for him, probably because it's out of sight, out of mind.
Wait, truckers are on the road and not at the terminal? Who would have thought?
No idea. So our next one. So a log truck overturned onto a daycare playground. Before we get too far into it, I know that that's terrifying. There were no kids in the playground. It actually was nap time, so they were all inside. And my major reason for wanting to cover this is branding, you know, because it's one of those things. If you're a millennial and you just heard log truck tipped over, you immediately saw that scene from Final Destination in the back of your head.
It is some terrifying stuff. But I'll tell you what, I mean, you know, no one was harmed in it, but there's definitely going to be some questions on how close that playground is to somewhere where there's traffic where a truck can overturn on top of it.
That's fair. So it's time to go behind the wheel. Once again, being partnered with CDLLife, we have access to the world's largest driver audience. So that being said, we can actually talk to them and get their opinions on things. So we get real opinions from real drivers about real issues. So we decided to ask them this week, trucking is a serious business, but do you think trucking companies take themselves too seriously? And all of the answers were yes. Like they do take themselves too seriously. But in the fairness of honest reporting, there was one comment that didn't say the trucking companies take themselves too seriously. And it was, I was going to comment and then I thought about it and I said to myself, don't get started on this. Which I mean, I would still say probably in agreement. So what do you think about that, Charles? Do you think trucking companies take themselves way too seriously?
Well, they try to walk the middle too much and to play it safe. And in doing so, they hurt themselves more than they help themselves because they all sound the same.
I mean, it's one of those things where like there's no effort to it's almost like they can't read the room. It's like they're trying to I've actually ran into a lot of companies who are trying to placate to potential clients and drivers at the same time. And so they, by following this middle ground, it just turns into this super bland.
Hence season 1.
Fair enough. That being said, it is time for, once again, our newest segment for season 3, Behind the Desk, where we talk to Tenstreet about what this looks like from the carrier side and carrier opinion.
All right, so for Behind the Desk with Tenstreet, we got Drew Sparks. How are we doing today, Drew?
Hey, how's it going?
I mean, we're here and we got Tenstreet for this new segment in season 3. So let's hear what you got to say about branding today.
For sure. So before being at Tenstreet, I actually worked at a trucking company, and we sat down and tried to figure out how to make our brand stand out and what to do with it, right? We wanted to revamp how things looked as far as the sales and identity of the brand without losing the family-oriented branding we had already built up over those years. So what the goal was to make the company more nimble and to make our sales documents, all of the publications look better as they got pushed out without having to have marketing touch on every single one, right? When I joined the company, they had I think it was 12 different logos, and everybody had their preference on which one they wanted to use and how to use it. So we had a format that came up. We made it really easy. So now on the recruiting side, recruiting branding is really weird. So recruiting branding, you're selling a relationship as well as a product. And it's also really easy for drivers to compare what products are where, right? So jobs, since they're so easily compared to one another, you have to have a little bit of sparkle to stand out and push it out there. But you also, the core of all of it has to be standing out on your merits rather than your sparkle. If you try to do too much at first, then you're going to have a hard time. Here at Tenstreet, we have a saying called, what's the problem we're trying to solve? So in marketing branding, you're going to go out, and the problem to solve is to essentially get more drivers to apply, right? So assign the exact goal of your brand before you actually go about making it. So once you have your goal in mind, design something that meets that and make it happen. The hardest part with branding a employment opportunity is that it's really hard to measure. Did the branding actually work better, or did the market change? It's hard to compare things side by side.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that insight, and we'll see you next week.
At TAFS, we offer unparalleled trucking excellence and service. Enjoy exclusive benefits like fantastic tire discounts and 1-hour advances for quick cash. Recognized as the top factoring company in 2023, we're your partner for success. Access business loans, manage finances with ease through our client portal, F2 fuel card, and mobile app. Contact us now to see how we can help your trucking business thrive.
So now it's time for Make Sense. And we're talking about branding and why it matters. And, from somebody that started a company out of my garage to where it's at now, I could tell you branding does matter. If nobody knows how good you're doing, then it doesn't matter how good you're doing. And it has to be consistent to the message and the culture that you have there. So this is near and dear to me, at least, because I saw how much of a role it played in the growth of Hot Seat. Paul, you work on the branding side. I mean, this is something that's important to you. It's why you got your main start going.
Yeah, I mean, so I used to work at a trucking company, and our whole thing was these ads are terrible. Truck driving ads are terrible for jobs. They're just, truck driving. I make the same joke all the time. It's a truck driving past a field of wheat with a deep voice. That's like, we're going to treat you with respect. Like, nobody cares. These people are getting off an exhausting day. They have 10 hours to themselves, and they pull out their phone. The last thing they want to see is that they want to be entertained. They want value. They want something that they don't feel like they're wasting their time watching. And we made a bunch of long form, funny videos. We doubled our fleet size. And I used to have people call into recruiting specifically to ask for the fat guy that took his shirt off in the back of the truck. So while that might seem controversial and edgy, whatever, to some companies, it worked. And then I went on to start my own video business. doing the same thing, trying to help companies make videos that help them stand out. Obviously, as far as they were willing to take it, but a few did take it further, and they did great. Um,
And it's important that people recognize that, your message shouldn't match everyone else's. You've been doing this a long time, much like myself, and you hear a lot, hey, I saw this, I want to do this, but just with our brand. And that's the wrong mentality to take to it. You should want to communicate your culture, your brand, and you should be willing to take a little risk with it. Otherwise, you're going to sound like everyone else. And then the risk is no one hears you.
And the other important thing is to not just say the same things over and over, especially if it's what a lot of other people are saying. People want updates. People want progression. If you're not doing anything new, those people have no reason to come back and checking out what you're doing. So kind of like our guest today, which always keeps you on your toes. So we have the VP of Creative from a company who over doubled their revenue in 2023, bringing in over $236 million, and now has a valuation of $1.4 billion. And if you happen to be keeping score, that is approximately $300 million more than Taylor Swift's estimated net worth. Largely in part to their collaborations with other brands and celebrities, their environmental awareness. But you could be argued that it's mostly because they have some of the most controversial, contrasting branding the mainstream market has seen possibly ever. So we have Andy Pearson from Liquid Death. How's it going, man?
Hey, good. That's quite an intro.
The biggest pop star on the planet. You guys are technically, as a company, worth more than she is. That's pretty nuts. So, but that being said, your main product that you're selling is water and tea in a can. So it's like there isn't anything inherently crazy or spectacular about that by itself. But you guys Liquid Death is one of the most buzzworthy brands on the market today. So can you kind of walk me through how that came about?
Yeah, we were founded by a guy who was himself in advertising and branding, and he was like a designer by trade, Mark Cesario. And we both come from similar backgrounds. He created the brand a number of years ago based off this idea that, all the most fun brands in the world were the ones that are the worst for us, right? So it's like, if you think of beer advertising, beer advertising always has the funny spots on the Super Bowl, or, candy advertising always has like the craziest, goofiest things, or energy drinks always are like the most intense, right? And so the idea was really like, hey, what if we took something that was actually healthy and treated it like it was unhealthy? What would happen then, right? And the original idea was simply the idea of taking water and putting it into a tall boy can and making it look like beer, right? And then from there, that idea alone is kind of wild. But then we're going to call a name that literally, if it's sitting on a shelf, you almost have to take out your phone and take a picture of it. This thing in a store that says Liquid Death, you're like, what is this? Right? And so in some ways, I would almost argue Liquid Death is one of the first viral consumer packaged goods, right? It was the can itself was really designed to make you stop and think, and make you share and make you talk about it, right? And then tie that into this idea that we have of death to plastic. Because as we looked into it, it was really hard when they first were looking into how to can water at the source to be considered spring water, because it just didn't exist. No one was putting spring water in cans. And as they were diving into why that was the case, you looked at it and it was like, oh, it's because water has always been marketed for its purity, right? And so if you think of imagine any bottled water ad in your mind right now, and it might be black and white, or it might be like a mountain and there's little trickling springs. And so in order to sell it as pure, you had to be able to see it. And so to be able to see it, you're putting in plastic bottles. And so literally no one had tried to do anything other than that. It was a marketing strategy that had literally never been questioned since water had ever been bottled in plastic bottles, right? And so when we came along, we put it in cans, it changes your perception of what that even is. And we had people telling us, they were like, I would get on calls when I first started here about 3 years ago, and they'd be like, no one's ever going to drink water out of a can. I'm like, well, you drink your soda, your beer, your energy drinks with it has all kinds of crazy shit in it, and you don't trust water out of a can. How insane is that? And so that's been the really fun kind of psychology of this, is unwinding people from the kind of default choices that they take. And what I think Liquid Death does, it kind of snaps you out of what you have what you have just taken by rote, right? What you've kind of mindlessly consumed, and it stops you in your tracks for a moment, and it makes you actually think about choices that you're making. And so I think that's what, that's sort of the power in the actual product itself. And then we've taken that and spun that into marketing by making marketing that questions marketing itself, essentially.
I've never seen anything that you guys put out that didn't have an entertainment value to it. I'm imagining that's intentional. And if so, like, what kind of value to the brand success has that brought?
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm in marketing, and I think marketing sucks. And I think like 99% of people don't want to be marketed to, right? So can we just that's my thing, is like, can we start there? Can we all admit no one wants to have the thing that they were actually trying to watch interrupted by something that they didn't want to watch, right? That is probably universal, or at least 99% there, right? So if we accept that fact, what do you do with that? And it's like, oh, well, what if we just made entertainment? And for us, that it functions as marketing, but our goal is just to basically make the best thing someone sees that day. That's what we talk about a lot here, is like, make the best thing that someone sees that day. And if that's the goal of what you're making, holy shit, you are making something totally different than most, advertising agencies or marketing firms or brands are making, right? So that's, with that goal in mind, that's the way we approach it. Entertainment, not marketing. And to do that, we also talk about like winning the internet for the day. So it's like, can we make something that is that's the best thing that someone's going to see, and then that is also something that like everyone wants to talk about and share. And I think like in a past world, someone would call use the V word and call it the viral thing, but we want to, I don't think we think of it as that. It's just like something that literally kind of captures hearts and minds for a day, and then we move on and let people go about the rest of their day or rest of their week, and they don't need to hear from us again until we come back with another piece of entertainment that we really love and we want to share with the world too.
That's awesome. So that being said, you kind of you alluded to having a background in similar things. So one thing I've done, like with marketing and being like a video guy and producing commercials, I've tried so many times and failed to get clients to take a more humorous or entertaining approach with their marketing. So I guess from someone who does it, how would you convince a company to go from more traditional marketing to something more humorous and entertainment like centric?
I mean, it's hard because I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. Humor is hard. It's easy to do earnest, pretty like without much skill or tact. To do humor, it really requires, and to pull it off, it really requires some serious, I think, like skill and also a little bit of science, as that's kind of what I've learned through doing this. But yeah, I mean, again, it points back to this thing that, as you were just saying before, it's like you get off on a hard day, a long day on the job. You don't want to like something mopey and pandering to it. You want to be entertained, right? So I think again, it's going back to, you kind of have to appeal to the human behind the company, right? You have to kind of make that sort of argument that, hey, look, let's try this. You yourself would rather laugh than just be hit in the face by another piece of marketing. And so, I mean, for us, we're lucky because we were built from the ground up on entertainment and humor, right? That is literally how we're built. So it's very easy for us to, I mean, that's kind of the whole premise of it. Getting someone over there is obviously, I don't know if I have like the best advice on that, because that's, that was sort of the insight that we started with and grew into that and have more fully grown. But I would say, like, I think it's really that kind of appealing to the human. And when you find that, I think that's been the fun thing with Liquid Death, is for all the, the wackiness we've done, there's a lot of heart behind the things we're doing. There's a lot of reason behind it. It's not like just a shotgun approach of all kinds of crazy stuff for crazy stuff. We're really thoughtful about it. And I think that's the other cool thing when you dive in the brand, you realize that all the thought that goes into it. So I think using kind of a similar approach in the pitch as you're working with clients, I think that can help to appeal.
That's interesting because you guys have slogans like murder your thirst and death to plastic. And at the end of the day, it's water or tea in a can. And you haven't lost sight of that. So what's the secret to the balance of, having that fun and creating those slogans that stick, but still marketing what it is?
Yeah. Well, I think, like I said, if you're starting from the premise that it's all marketing, if we can all agree to that, us as a company and you as the viewer, that's already a more honest place than most ads start from, right? So if we acknowledge that it's an ad to begin with, now we can enter the world of satire with you, right? And so I think if you look at all of our stuff, it's all satirical, right? The idea of murder your thirst is an insane tagline. it's a parody of what a tagline should be, right? Because no brand in the right mind would use a tagline like murder your thirst. So right. But that's what makes it interesting. It's this thing, like at every turn, liquid death feels like it should not exist. We talk a lot about this. It's like, it feels like it's an SNL commercial, but it's come to life and it's literally sitting on your, in the cooler at the convenience store or whatever. And so I think to go back to what you're saying, I think by acknowledging that's an ad in the first place, sometimes we actually get to be really silly because we're making a satire of what an ad is. And so this is a trick that I learned long ago. It's like, if it's a satire, you can say all the addy, salesy stuff that you actually want to say, but it's also a joke. And so it's kind of working on two levels where you get to say the thing you want to say, but then also you're making it entertaining.
Speaking of, one of my favorite set of advertisements was essentially like hate tweets that you guys would get about marketing, or like the greatest hate albums that you guys dropped. So can we talk about a couple things with that? Like how, obviously how you dealt with the backlash, but are you a believer that if people are criticizing you, you're doing it right? And ultimately, where is the line between realizing your campaign marketing might be bad or it's time to move on despite the critics? Like, should you keep going or is it just bad?
I mean, no, I look, like fear is such a more powerful motivator than success, weirdly enough. And you find that in marketing where, it's like, oh no, someone left a negative comment on our Instagram post and the entire organization freaks out, right? You see that where the analogy that someone said the other day was great. It was like, imagine you're in a football stadium and it's filled with 60,000 people that are all cheering for you, a post or whatever. And then there's 6 people over here that are screaming boo because they don't like what you did, right? In marketing, we just focus on the negative when that happens, right? And they're like, oh no, people said something bad about us. And so we have to fix that. But if you were standing in the stadium, you would never even hear that. You wouldn't even pay attention, right? So I think it's in human nature to look at like negativity towards us as like to focus on that. For us, it's just hilarious because all the negativity that's thrown at us, we're like, what, you're against giving people healthier choices and more sustainable choices for the planet, right? So yeah, so we took all these hate comments that we would get all the time by people that just did not understand what we're doing whatsoever, and we turned them into 3 albums. We had a metal album, a punk album, and now an 80s dance album. It just shows it's like that kind of like hater attitude. If you have haters, you're doing something right, I started my own podcast recently, and it has nothing to do with this. I do like ultra running on the side, ultra marathons and stuff, and all the reviews were they were all 5-star or like 1-star, and I was like, hell yeah, we're doing it right. Because you either get it and you love it, or like you hate it. And I think you have to, that's the approach you have to take, because it's like the worst thing that people can feel about you is nothing. That is the absolute worst thing. And that is what, again, 95% of marketing is doing. It's making nothing happen. It makes you feel nothing. It just blends in with everything else. And so if you can make somebody feel something, that's the emotion one way or another that's going to actually cause action.
Pay attention, trucking. So, you know, you got a lot of good takes there. And one of the ones I wanted to ask you about is, how do you build that brand loyalty? You know, how do you get that buy-in from people?
It's like, we have people who are fans of Liquid Death. I'm a fan of Liquid Death too. Like, I work there and I'm a fan of what we do. But we've done that by, again, giving people entertainment over time. We're giving people, I mean, the stories that we hear from people about, like, moms that write in that was like, my high schooler was addicted to energy drinks and now he's drinking Liquid Death, or people that are dealing with alcoholism or cutting back. It's a huge, you know, there's a legit thing that we're doing in people's lives, or cutting down on soda or something like that. That's one side of it. I think from like the branding side and the stuff that we're doing, we're making it accessible. I mean, you talk about like people not getting it, and we had to write 3 whole albums with the lyrics. If you're on the outside of that, you don't get what we're doing. If you're on the inside, it's really funny, and it makes it funnier that people are on the outside that don't get it. And so we've kind of made, I used to think of it as like the world's largest inside joke, like the world's largest corporate inside joke in a way, right? Liquid Death is, again, it's an insane thing. If you buy a piece of merch and wear it around and it's this trippy skull that says Liquid Death, it looks like you're the fan of a degenerate who's a fan of like black metal or something, right? But it's just a water company. And so there's a joke there. And then another thing that we do a lot is I think we're just really playful with people. I think like the can itself is kind of inherently interactive. If you're holding it, you'll get people that will ask you about it or make a comment or wonder what it is. And so I think the can, it literally is like kind of this interactive thing. And so I think with fans that are, you know, follow us on social or something like that, we make content to like mess with people and make it this really fun two-way street. And I think that's another thing that's really cool, because you see how big of fans people are, and they want to make stuff for us and they want to play around. And so we'll really lean into that and pull people in. And so it's this like really kind of organic push and pull with people that we want to make it feel like this mushy space that everyone can enter in and all find ways to laugh together, essentially.
Yeah, I would definitely say when I stopped drinking, I definitely showed up to a couple parties with those, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, what kind of beer is that?" I'm like, "It's not." Yeah. But yeah, I guess last question really. And you kind of touched on it earlier, but like cuz trucking, like we talked about, a lot of trucking companies are the same. And you sort of touched on it earlier, based on their branding, a lot of them, when they say, "Oh, this is what we want to do with our marketing," because this is what this company is doing. Like, I've gotten a lot of clients because they wouldn't have used me, but then another trucking company in the same area used me. So they're like, "Oh, I got to get that too." Right. And so with water, yeah, like, you know, you touched on it, like everybody uses clear bottles, or like there's say what country the water's imported from, or, you know, triple osmosis, stuff like that. You guys are just like, it's water.
Well, I mean, so I'll take that talking about water. I mean, you'd be an idiot to enter the beverage category. When you look at everything that you're up against and all the choices on the shelf, you would, I mean, it is a fool's errand to try to get into that industry. But so in order to do that, we had to be totally different. We had to do something that literally nobody had ever seen before. And had to approach it in a totally different mindset. I mean, for us, it's not just about the branding, it's about the entire business, the way we approach everything. We're always coming to it as if it's the first time we're doing anything ever, right? So whether that's the way we hire people, whether that's our approach with media dollars that we're spending, which we basically don't really spend much on. We basically don't buy media. We just use that money and put it in entertainment, whether it's the way that we do everything in-house ourselves and produce it all ourselves because we want to have ultimate creative control rather than farming that out to somebody. At every step of the process, we look at it and we're saying, how would we do this better? If we start from scratch, what would be the way that'd be the smarter way to do this, or the hack, versus the way that it's always been done? And so I think that is not just on the marketing side, but on the entire company. Like that's the approach, that kind of beginner's mind of looking at everything fresh. It's day one. How would you do this in the smartest way possible, using the least amount of money to get the best results? And so I think especially, in marketing, you can get so wound up in just like, this is the way you do it. As you're saying, it's like you have a truck going past the cornfields and then a really earnest VO, and because that's the way it's supposed to be done. And you have to kind of step back and be like, well, what if we started over, and what would we do then? And that's where it gets fun for me. I mean, that's like, dude, every day we're inventing something new or trying to figure out a hack on something. Like that's where it gets really fun. And I think hopefully that even comes on the work that the people behind it are also having fun. And I think, when you talked about like, how do you get people in? I think like, if we're having fun with our jobs and making this thing that goes out to you, you're going to be invited in on that and have fun with us as well.
I think that's huge. A lot of times, especially in the trucking sector, everyone wants to blend in and do what everyone else is doing, kind of like what we talked about earlier in the show. And here we have a prime example with Liquid Death and your team, that you guys are having fun. It's contagious. It's carrying over into your audience. You're not trying to recreate the broken wheel everyone else is using. You're making a whole new wheel and you're rolling with that. And success is there. I mean, it's evident in the numbers.
We got 18 wheels, man. We're going for it.
Well, you're on a roll. Trucking can't quite say that yet.
All right, well, dude, that's, and it's kind of like Charles said, it's really hard to argue with success. Those are some amazing insights. So yeah, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hot Seat Services has Rent-A-Recruiter.
Wait!
Hey Michael, have you heard that Hot Seat Services Rent-A-Recruiter service will place their staff in your organization similar to a temporary hire model?
No way, what else does it do?
Follow me, I have to tell everyone. They take leads in existing databases to put new hires into your business's trucks.
Well, shiver me timbers! What else?
Come on! Their model is more cost efficient because their recruiters are trained and can get your pipeline flowing easier and faster.
No way. Anything else?
No matter how many hires they make, it's a set cost per week, so the more they get, the better their client's cost per hire gets.
Holy sh**.
For more information and to find out for yourself, go to hotseatservices.com.
That was some great stuff, and as always, all good things got to come to an end, so thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.